So welcome to the July Power Hour. I'm Dale Camsell, the Senior Technical Consultant to the CEA. The more observant of you will have noticed I'm not Joanna Oliver. She unfortunately wasn't able to join us today. She normally starts proceedings and then hands over to whoever is presenting. But since I'm presenting today, we figured it was best if I just get the thing started and go into the main presentation. So welcome to this session. So we're going to take about an hour going through a regulatory update. At the end of that, so at 2 p.m, we will be moving directly on the same link. So you just stay online into the annual general meeting of the CEA. It'd be greatly appreciated if you could stay on for that. It'd be 15-20 minutes maximum, but it is an important part of the governance of the CEA. So it'd be greatly appreciated if you could stay online for that when we're done at 2 p.m. Thank you very much indeed. So, as mentioned, I'm Dale Camsell. I guess I'm familiar to some of you, maybe not to all of you. I'm going to be taking you through today's material. As usual, we will go through some housekeeping. So this webinar will be held in accordance with the CEA corporate compliance policy rules. Any deviation from that, neither myself or somebody from the CEA will stop the meeting and bring it to order. This session is being recorded and it will be made available along with the slide you're about to see on the website shortly after today's session. Please, as usual, stay on mute and keep your video off to conserve bandwidth. If it comes to a Q&A and you need to raise your voice, then unmute, but in general, please remain muted. There is a chat box function and I'd ask you to use that to raise any questions. I normally prefer open flowing dialogue, but due to the numbers on the call, it might not be possible. It might get a bit chaotic. So I'd ask you to submit questions during the presentation into the chat, and then we'll answer those as best we can. If necessary, of course, we can always open up for live dialogue. As ever, we'll do our best to ensure that we don't have any technical glitches, but those can never be guaranteed. So please bear with us if we do have any problems. So the material I'm going to be covering today, and in fact, let me go up to full screen so you can see better. So the material I'm going to be covering today splits into two sections, really. There is the section covering the latest updates we have on Brexit. And since I have the opportunity, I will also like to introduce you to some of the latest information that's coming out of the EU on some major changes to regulations that are of significant consequence to CEA members. Now, before I go any further, I'll just say there's an awful lot of material here, and I'm not going to race to try and get all of this covered by 2 o'clock because there's such a large amount of material. I want to do it justice. So anything we don't cover by the time we get to 2 o'clock, we'll hold over and we'll delay that. We'll defer it to a subsequent power hour. So you will get to see it, but maybe not in today's presentation. I think we really need to do justice, especially to this upper part here where we're covering Brexit. And going back to the how we're going to address questions, what I will do is when we get through the Brexit related part of the presentation, I'm going to pause and we'll cover the questions related to Brexit then, and then move on to the EU regulations rather than plough on and then otherwise it'll become a bit disjointed. So there will be a break for Q&As shortly or immediately after we get to the end of the Brexit section. Okay, so let's get into it. So just a couple of preliminary things. All the information I'm going to be providing you on where we are on the UKCA situation is based on guidance that has been recently released and previously released, I guess, from the UK government. It's not based on the regulations themselves because in large they haven't been written or published yet. Now, I'd like to think that the guidance or the final regulation will not deviate from the guidance we've been provided at the moment. There is always that possibility, but since the government has actually gone into print in the virtual sense in their online guidance, I would hope that the final regulation ends up reflecting very closely what is in the guidance. This is, of course, the reverse to the usual situation where we have the regulation itself is published it's fixed, it's frozen, it's finalized, and then sometime after, the guidance comes out, which provides helpful explanatory information. This is the reverse. We're having to work off guidance because it's all we've got, and the regulation will follow up in due course. So slightly reversal, but unfortunately, it's all we can work with at the moment. Of course, as ever, the information is my best understanding of the guidance, my interpretation. It does not constitute legal advice. I will, of course, do my absolute best to answer queries, but please bear in mind that this, the usual disclaimer that this is not legal advice I'm providing you with in the next hour. So about a month ago, a month and a day ago, the BEIS, so the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, who I'll be referring to as BEIS for the rest of the hour, made some pretty significant changes to the guidance they had previously issued, and with relaxations in the 4 areas there you see on the screen related to UKCA marking, and I'm going to cover each of those now. The really one important message I need to get across is that you'll hear about easing of this situation and the relaxation of UKCA requirements. That is true to a certain extent. The really important thing to bear in mind is that there is no relaxation in the implementation date of UKCA marking, which remains the 1st of January 2023. So machines placed on the GB market from the 1st of January next year must be UKCA marked. There has been no relaxation, no delay in that deadline. That is absolutely fixed and has not gone back. Of course, the usual caveat there applies in that manufacturers based in Northern Ireland are exempt from UKCA marking. They can continue to place CE marked machines on the GB market by virtue of the unfettered access clause in the withdrawal agreement. That is always going to be the case. I'm going to put that to one side and park that for a moment. So in general, machines that are placed on the GB market from the 1st of January 2023 must be UKCA marked. Okay, so that is fixed. But what has changed in the recent guidance is how you go about demonstrating and complying with the UKCA requirements. And the first of these changes, a very welcome change as well, is the change in the conformity assessment requirements by third parties. So up until this most recent guidance was given, the UK situation was that any mandatory third-party assessments that back up a UKCA mark had to be performed by a UK recognised approved body. So possibly the most common example of this in our sector would be noise accreditation, noise assessments, and we were struggling with the lack of capacity in the availability of UK approved bodies to be able to perform all of the necessary testing. So we were very concerned about this and had made our feelings very clearly known to BEIS. And I'm pleased to say that BEIS has responded, and that they will now, as indicated in the new guidance, accept EU notified body approvals, and these can be used as the basis for UKCA marking. So whereas previously UKCA marking could only be backed up by approvals where necessary from a UK approved body, what they're saying now is a UKCA mark can be applied on the basis of either an approval from a UK approved body or, and this is what's changed, an EU approved or notified body. So the documentation, the conformity assessments that you might be already using for CE marking can now be used for UKCA marking, and there is no need to, at this point in time, obtain approvals from a UK approved body where they are mandatory for UKCA marking. As I say, noise measurements would probably be the most common example in our sector. Now, this is great. It's welcome for those members who have not yet managed to, through no fault of their own, obtain the the approval from a UK approved body. But it is time limited. It is time limited to by one of two parameters. One being it is time limited to the extent of the validity of the approval from the EU notified body. So once that approval expires, your UKCA marking therefore would become invalid. So you'll need to obtain your approval from a UK body prior to the expiring of the approval from the EU body, or up until 5 years after the 1st of January next year, i.e. 31st of December 2027, whichever of those comes soonest. So if, for example, you had an approval from an EU notified body that was valid until the 29th of November 2027, you will be able to use that as the basis for UKCA marking from the 1st of January next year. You could do it from now if you like. You can already UKCA mark, but it will remain valid through until, if I can remember the date, 29th of November 2027, because that is the validity of that certificate. And you will have up until that date in order to organise yourself and be able to obtain an approval from a UK accredited approved body to replace that EU approval and to provide continuity to the GB market. So a significant relaxation certainly was one of the main worry aspects that industry had leading up to the end of this year, and the mandatory implementation of the UKCA mark from the 1st of January next year, which, as I mentioned, still remains the case, but now you can UKCA mark on the basis of an EU approval. For manufacturers who follow that route, who UKCA mark on the basis of an EU notified body approval, BEIS recommends some certain additional information is included in the UK Declaration of Conformity, and that is that the list of relevant UK designated standards and equivalent EU harmonised standards that were applied are included and listed in the UK DOC. And also that the notified body that was used in the performance of the conformity assessment is also identified on the DOC. However, I note that the guidance says recommends. So whether or not that will be a mandatory requirement, I doubt. But it appears it doesn't say that it's a mandatory requirement; it's a recommendation. But obviously, it would probably be wise to follow the advice provided by BEIS on that. So a significant change, and one which is certainly very welcome by industry, and one which we were striving for. So that's the first of those 4 bullets. The second is the labelling of imported stock. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that any products placed on the market from the 1st of January next year must be UKCA marked. And that is generally true. There is a slight caveat, which I didn't bring up on the first slide because I didn't want to overcomplicate and bring in too many caveats on in my first bullet point. But BEIS has also recognised that in many cases, manufacturers will have a stock of product that has already been bought in and ready to be sold next year. Of course, market conditions deviate. You have good months and bad months, and there's a concern about what about CE marked stock machines that were bought in this year, but were and are in stock and are placed on the market next year. Well, provided that machinery was imported by the end of this year, then the UK BEIS will consider that they were actually placed on the market already, and therefore there is no need to UKCA mark them if they weren't already UKCA marked. There is no requirement now to put an additional UKCA label on those machines. They can be placed on the market next year in with just the CE mark on them. Now, this could probably be already have implied from the existing rules regarding placing on when a product was placed on the market, but this is more for clarity than a change. But it's certainly been a welcome piece of clarity that any machinery that is CE marked and has been imported into GB by the end of this year can continue to be placed on the market with just a CE mark next year. And then on a slightly similar theme with spare parts, again, UK industry was concerned and had made representation to BEIS about our concerns, and that is that spare parts often sit on the shelf for years. There's no knowing when they will be go out and put installed in machines as replacement parts. Now, what has happened here is that BEIS has said that where any spare parts that have CE marking on them, so I'm not talking about washers and bolts and individual components, I'm talking about probably systems, subsystems that require and have CE marking on them, but maybe have been already sat on the shelf for some time, awaiting a call out to go and be installed in a machine which is broken down, those spare parts will be considered to have been placed on the market at the same time that the original part was, and therefore, that the original machine was in which the part is going to be installed, and therefore, any machines that are running around out there right now in service, spare parts that require conformity assessment and CE marking, as is now, or UKCA marking from next year, actually it will be sufficient to just have those CE marked, even if they don't go out into the field at a subsequent date. So for machinery that is already out and running around, spare parts that require a conformity assessment mark can continue just to be CE marked for machines that are already in service. So again, a bit of a significant relaxation, because there was a concern amongst manufacturers that these spare parts, which are CE marked, are sat on the shelf awaiting call out, and what would need to be done with them if they don't get called out until next year. So again, some easement on the conditions in that respect, which again is welcome. All of the points I've considered so far and discussed so far are included in the guidance, which is included in a link here on in the presentation. As I say, you'll receive this presentation afterwards. So if you wish to see further detail in the guidance itself and look at the specific wording provided by BEIS, you can find it by following this link. So the final of those 4 points was regarding the marking or how you supply the UKCA mark and the importer's information. Now, the legislation already calls for certain marks to be placed on a machine, and these will include the importer's details and the UKCA mark as a mandatory requirement in most cases from the 1st of January next year. Now, in order to ease the transition to UKCA marking and to ease the transition of having to have the importer's details, which ordinarily have to be on a label which is attached to the machine, which is the same situation as the UKCA mark, that would ordinarily be required to be on a label which is actually affixed to the machine. The guidelines up until 20th of June last year were that there were certain deadlines by which this information was allowed to be provided on an accompanying document rather than on a label on the machine, in order to ease the transition. And for the importer's details, that was 31st of December this year, and for the UKCA mark, that was 31st of December next year. However, these dates have been deferred, been delayed, and they are now both put back to the same date, that date being the 31st of December 2025. So at the moment, these dates are different. They will be aligned to the same date, 31st of December 25. So giving a few years additional time for manufacturers to be able to switch this importer's information from an accompanying document, or the UKCA mark from an accompanying document, to an actual physical label that is on the machine. After the 31st of December 2025, the information must be provided on labels that are affixed to the machine, unless the machine is so small that it becomes impractical, or sector legislation allows exemptions from that. But in general, in our industry, that's not really the case. So we have until the 31st of December 2025 to make this information provided in the form of a label that is attached to the machine. Again, a further relaxation. One really important thing to mention, though, and I'm not sure, I want to make sure that everybody understands it, because there have been some queries in the past, is that this allowance for applying the importer's details on an accompanying document only applies to products that are imported from Europe, generally from EU and from the EEA. Products that are coming in from, say, the USA or Japan, this exemption does not apply, and those importers' details need to be on a label on the machine. The reason for that is Brexit has had no real effect on that, because before Brexit, you would have had to have had a label on the machine for machines coming into the GB market from the USA or Japan. So the fact that the UK has left the EU has no bearing. It only has a bearing on products that are coming from the EU and EEA, where previously they weren't being imported because they were in the same market. So because of this change, there's this easement to allow the information to be provided on accompanying document, but just to stress that only exists for the products coming from the EU and EEA countries. There is slightly different guidance for this, and that is and the link is here. As mentioned, you will be able to find that in this presentation when you receive it. Now, I have got a couple more slides before I open the floor for questions. At the moment, I've been covering machine-based aspects that were changed in the guidance quite recently. And I'm going to go on to a second to talk about the changes in dates to NRMM engine implementation dates. However, I don't want to lose the opportunity before moving on to the engines to talk about the advocacy that is going on behind the scenes. I've mentioned all of these changes industry has been asking for, so that they haven't come around by accident, they haven't come around by lucky chance. CEA, along with other industry associations, have been working hard behind the scenes, advocating these positions to BEIS. So just for your information, the CEA instigated earlier this year an industry forum. It's called the UK Equipment and Machinery Industry Forum, which is a meeting, a membership of, at the moment, 14 members. In fact, I think that's gone up to 15 in the last week, and it continues to grow. So it's 15 associations strong. We meet 2 or 3 times a year. Obviously, we've only met twice so far because we only just kicked off. And we gather and we talk about members of areas of common interest. So any consultations that are ongoing for UK legislation, any future UK legislation that is in development, specifically related to machinery and associated equipment. And we discuss with the aim to come to a common agreement, a common position on these matters, so that we can go to UK government with a united voice. Its experience speaks very strongly in favour of when associations speak with one voice and have a common position, the results are generally more favourable than if each association goes to government with maybe a slightly different message, because then it's confusing to the government. Which one do they take? Do they take none of them? Is it a compromise? Whereas if we can do that compromise behind the scenes and then go to government, it generally ends up with a better result. And we can see here, we had all of those 4 issues I've just mentioned. We'd gone to BEIS with raising our concerns. In fact, BEIS attended the most recent meeting of this forum, which was held on the 9th of June, they heard our concerns, and then a few weeks later, we saw this guidance come out with the changes, which I think is a very successful reward for the advocacy we've been undertaking. We will continue, of course. We won't just tick the box and say, great, we've done a good job there, let's relax. We will continue to strive for the best for this association and the other associations who are involved. But it's great that we've seen the results. It's great also that BEIS has been so working in partnership with us. They've been so open to engage with us on these matters. They've been listening. They actually asked themselves if they invited themselves to this meeting. I had mentioned to them informally that we were forming this group, and they got in touch with me and said, actually, we've heard this meeting is going to be held in June. Can we come along? So they really are open to engagement, which is a huge bonus. It makes life so much easier. But we will continue to push forward on areas that we feel of importance and of common interest in this forum. So just wanted to mention that to you. If you hear about this industry forum, you know what it is. It's this group of associations that are all have an interest in machinery, and it's a common platform for us to form positions. Okay, so back to the technical stuff. GB type approval for NRMM engines. So it's a two-phase scheme. You may be aware there's a provisional scheme, which comes in on the 1st of January 2023, and then a full scheme, which comes in a little while later. And that's the critical aspect that I want to talk about, that the delay or the time at which that full scheme comes in. So there is no change to bring for you today about the provisional GBTA scheme. It will be implemented on the 1st of January 2023, which is obviously getting closer. We were expecting VCA to have opened the process for applications to be submitted in June. That has not happened. I was speaking to the DFT lead on this matter only last week, and he hoped that it would be open by the end of this month. If not, then he was quite confident that it would be open in August. So applications will be able to be provided. Obviously, it's just the engine manufacturer who needs to do this. It's not the machine manufacturer. So nothing for machine manufacturers to be concerned about here, but it will be open very shortly. And it is just a paperwork exercise only. The engine manufacturer writes to VCA, supplies them with the EU type approval, other documentation, and then if the VCA is satisfied, they will simply send a letter back to the engine manufacturer saying, yes, you have provisional type approval. Here is your type approval number, which will be P11, and then the rest of the serial or the rest of the type approval number based on the EU type approval number. And that is it. There will be no separate marking on the engine to be able to visually see that that engine has a provisional GB type approval. So it would be recommended that machine manufacturers ask their engine supplier for a copy of that letter, because otherwise they will not know. They will have no form of evidence looking at the engine to see that it has the appropriate approval. The provisional approval itself will remain valid for 24 months. That could be critical. I'll come on to that in a second. So that's the provisional scheme, which comes in on the 1st of January unchanged next year. What has changed is the implementation date of the GBTA scheme, the full scheme. I say it has changed, it will change. The legislation hasn't been addressed yet. The legislation is behind schedule. The DFT have not got the legislation finished yet. They recognise that it will not be ready in time or in enough time for manufacturers to be able to do the necessary, bearing in mind for some other sectors, the full scheme comes in on the 1st of January next year, and they have to have all of their approvals, their full approvals in place by then. So they recognise that this will not be the case, and therefore have delayed the full scheme for right across the board, which includes us. So originally we were expecting that the implementation date of the full scheme would be the 1st of January 2024. That is definitely going to be no longer the case. We don't have a firm date. The most recent date is the 1st of July 2024, so a 6-month delay. Whether it goes back beyond that is very much open to question, open to speculation, and it would be purely speculation. So I'm not going to suggest anything. 1st of July is the earliest I would say is we can expect the full scheme to come into force. Of course, if it goes back more than 6 months beyond the 1st of July 2024, i.e. sometime into 2025, then this would mean that the provisional type approvals, which have a validity of only 24 months, would be expiring before this full scheme comes in. So industry is engaging with government to understand what the situation would be if it did go back beyond 6 months. But that's something down the road. It's something we don't need to think about now. All you need to be aware of is that there will be delays to the full type approval scheme, and that the very earliest it is likely to come in is the 1st of July 2024. As ever, a caveat for Northern Ireland based manufacturers can continue to place NRMM engines on the GB market with an EU type approval on the basis of that unfettered access that I mentioned earlier. So, right, I believe so that covers the Brexit matters. So I will now, I'm going to open the chat and see what we have in the chat. So we have quite a few questions here. So I'll get through these as quickly as I can, and let's see what we have. So the first one I see is from Eagle. On spare parts, if such a part is intended to replace a part used on both the old CE mark machine as well as a new UKCA mark machine, which conformity assessment procedure should it meet? This is always the issue of having people who know what they're knowing the detail of the regulations coming to these matters, because they ask the awkward questions. So Eagle, at the moment, the guidance simply says pretty much as I'd said it, that the conformity assessment of the covering the spare part must match the conformity assessment that was in place at the time the machine in which the part is going was placed on the market. So it's open to interpretation as to what happens next year. It's open to interpretation as to the practicalities of implementing such a dual scheme. It's open to interpretation of how enforceable this will be. I certainly will not be going into any more detail on that. I think you know where I'm heading, but yeah, at the moment, all they have on that guidance is pretty much what I said, and really, I can't go beyond that, because then I'd be in danger of going veering outside what the guidance specifically says. It's certainly something that is on my radar, Igor. I think we need to discuss at the next GTC whether or not we seek clarification on that. There are benefits and negatives about asking for clarification. So a great question, because it is a void in the current guidance, and I think we'll discuss that in our next GTC. Next question.
Very well.
Okay, good. Thank you, Eagle. Thank you. So the next question is from Ian Staples. So dual marking, CE and UKCA. We have no actual guidance on this apart from a greyish area in the current CE marking document. Base guidance is also not specific. Where do we stand? I believe actually, Ian, I think in the latest version of the guidance, they do give some clarity. Certainly on the EU side, there is no problem with dual marking. It's clear in their guidance that you can. It's already done anyway, not with UKCA, but with EAC. So if anything is going off to the Eurasian group, it can be CE, EAC marked. So there's already a precedence in the EU. I think there is something in the latest guidance of the from the UK. In fact, I think it was there before as well. And in any case, we've been verbally informed very clearly that dual marking is fine for the GB market, CE, UKCA marking, provided, of course, that you comply with all of the requirements. That's also, that's obviously the important fundamental to discuss there. But yeah, I think that's relatively clear. But Ian, I'm happy to talk about that outside of the meeting if you want to go into further detail. Question from Alessandro. Oh, it looks like Alessandro has answered the question. So I will, there we go, if only I'd seen that to start with. So yeah, I think, thanks Alessandro for that. So is that all of the questions? I think that's everything. Did I miss anything, Robert? Or is that 3 questions covered?
I had one just now, sorry.
Okay. Thanks, Alessandro. That's a further comment from Igor about Bayes confirmed that dual marking is okay. Yeah, so I think that's fairly clear, Ian, that Bayes have clarified in the past that that dual marking is okay. Yes, and good point from Igor. Dual marking on a single plate is okay, but you cannot have the EU and UK DOC on the same sheet or merged into the same single document. They have to be separate to the extent that there can be no confusion as to which is the EU Declaration of Conformity and which is the UK Declaration of Conformity. So dual marking on the same plate is fine. Trying to merge both DOCs onto the same sheet of A4 is maybe not so good. The guidance is as long as it's clear, then you're clearly differentiated, then you're okay. All right then. So yep. So I think we're finished on the first section. Okay, so we have 22 minutes left. So we certainly have plenty of time to go into the machinery directive if my screen moves on. So yep. So we're going to draw an end to the Brexit part of the discussions there and move into the EU machinery directive. So for those who aren't aware, the machinery directive, which is really the basis for placing the safety basis for placing machines onto the EU market, is being revised. It's at a relatively advanced stage of progress. So back last April last year, the European Commission provided its proposal, its proposed legal text for the new regulation, and since then, in fact, up until last week, the 2 other institutions, i.e. the European Parliament and the European Council, have been reviewing it and internally coming up with what they think are the amendments that they want to see changed. Excuse me, to the proposal that was presented by the European Commission. So, as I say, that was the situation up until last week. So the very most recent information is that what's called the trialogue negotiations have begun, and that basically is these 3 institutions, the European Commission, the Council and the Parliament, are now locked behind closed doors and will be for the next 6 months or so while they thrash out their differences and come up with a compromise, and which will form the final legal text of the regulation. So it is expected that will be done by the end of this year. That is their expectation. I stress there's a lot of amendments to go through. There are a lot of changes. Some of them, some of the positions are quite diverse in some areas. So whether or not they stick to having this publication by the end of the year or not, who knows? If they do, then it would enter into force, and their timing again is early 2023. The most significant dates, though, in this process are for how long we can continue to place products on the EU market in accordance with the existing machinery directive, and at what stage must we switch over to placing products on the market in accordance with the new regulation. And that, I'm afraid, I can't tell you, because that is going to be an outcome of the trialogue negotiations, which are ongoing, but I'll come on to that and at the bottom of this slide. So proposals of note, there are literally hundreds. I mean, there have been over the last 18 months, thousands of amendments put in. They are now whittled down to maybe 100 or so proposals to vary from the original Commission proposal. And I'm going to take you through what maybe are the most important. I won't dwell on these first three because they are to do with the structure of the document and how and the framework, the legal framework in which it will be placed. But just to say that these three actually present better alignment with the existing legal framework and other pieces of legislation. So we generally welcome these alignments. The one important aspect is that the regulation, the machinery regulation, was released as part of a package which included the artificial intelligence regulation, and the two of them were interlinked because they were there were cross-references between the two. However, due to technical reasons and the fact that the artificial intelligence regulation has fallen way behind its development schedule, the two have been decoupled, and so no longer does the machinery regulation make any reference to the artificial intelligence regulation, and might not actually, and probably will not actually, include the words artificial intelligence in the final version. So we will see how that comes out, but the bottom line is that these two regulations are disconnected, and that effectively frees up the machinery regulation to continue its development, whereas previously it was being held back by the artificial intelligence regulation. So the timing on the first page is slightly more realistic now. But I mentioned on that previous page about the when the repeal, so i.e. when the ending of the existing machinery directive is, and when the new regulation comes into effect. Well, as I mentioned, I couldn't say exactly when because there's a difference in the three in the positions of the three institutions. So the European Commission, when they released their proposal last year, said 30 months. The European Council proposed 36 months, and the Parliament have got the most of all and have got 48. Now, industry, CC was pushing for even more than this, if I remember rightly. Some were pushing for up to 54 and even 72 months. We have to see which of these prevail, whether it's somewhere in between, whether it's 36 because that's in between, or what, I don't know. We will have to see. The reason industry is calling for a transition period of reasonable length is not only because we might need to redesign, readjust and conformity assess machines, but there are something like over 800 harmonized standards that provide a presumption of conformity with the existing machinery directive. Each and every one of those will have to be revised. It might just be editorial to update the references to the clauses because the new regulation has been reordered. So the clause numbers are all different. But some of them will have significant technical changes to go through as well. And that takes time. So industry has been calling certainly for this or longer, but we'll have to see where this ends up. So on a more technical note, what's inside this regulation? So the substantial modification, which has been a corker, which has been a hot topic for longer than I care to remember. Every time this topic comes up, we get division between stakeholders and between different sectors. This has been addressed. It will be defined in the final text, in the legal text, and obligations on people who perform substantial modifications will be included. So I think these are helpful. These are a step in the right direction. In principle, whether or not the final definition and whether or not those final obligations are what we would like to see, again, is a different matter because that will come out of the trialogue. But at least I think industry is generally welcoming of the fact that we are substantial modification is being tackled in the regulation itself, rather than being left to the slightly more vague blue guide, which of course has to be vague because it covers all sorts of sectors. So step in the right direction with the caveat that we don't know what the final text will be. Then Annex 1 machinery. So Annex 1 of the regulation is going to be what was or what is Annex 4 of the current machinery directive, which is the machinery that requires conformity assessments to be performed by notified bodies if there aren't harmonized standards available. So they were already a special category. They move into Annex 1 of the new regulation, which is no matter. That's just an ordering situation. However, the European Commission had originally titled this Annex 1 and then referred in the text to machines in Annex 1 as being high-risk machinery. Well, of course, you can imagine we were not best pleased at having our machines referred to as being high risk. There was all sorts of consequences, legal and reputational and others, as to why we wouldn't want that. So the Parliament and Council proposals in those amendments I was mentioning earlier remove that term high risk, and they just simply refer to Annex 1 machinery, which is a much neater way, I believe. So again, a step in the right direction from Parliament and Council. So hopefully their arguments will win over the Commission, and we'll have that term removed. One other good development is in the field of digital instructions and machines that are intended for professional use, which of course is pretty much the entirety of the CEA's product portfolio. Manufacturers will, for those products, be able to provide the operator's manual in a digital form. So you will have to provide with the machine a link in whatever form, be it on the machine, in the operator's handbook, QR code, a web link, a means for the operator to be able to download the digital version of the operator's manual. So it will not be necessary for manufacturers to mandatorily provide a paper version of the instructions with the machine. However, if the purchaser or user, depending on what the final version is from the trial log, requests a paper copy of the instructions, then the manufacturer must do so, provide a paper copy for free. But that window for asking for a free version of the paper copy of the instructions is only open for 6 months. So there's only a 6-month window for that request to be submitted. But if it's submitted in that window, then a paper copy must be provided free of charge. However, in the whole, again, a welcome development is that for machines that will have professional users, the operator's manual can be provided digitally. So those were all positives. Slightly more negative aspect is, well, maybe not so negative, is an area covering technical specifications. So the European Commission have reserved the right to develop their own version of harmonized standards in areas where the European standardization bodies, so that would be typically CEN in our case, either refuse to provide to develop a standard after being requested to do so by the European Commission, or are taking too long to develop the standard. And if the European Commission believes that is the case, then they reserve the right legally to produce what they call technical specifications. They might be called common specifications. That's just a terminology matter. But in any case, a specification that would serve the same purpose as a harmonized standard. It would provide a presumption of conformity, but it would not be a harmonized standard. It would be a specification developed by the European Commission. Now, who the stakeholders would be involved, who would have the final decision on if there's areas of division is an open matter at the moment. CEN standards are developed on a consensus basis with all stakeholders who are able to join, which is a broad spectrum of stakeholders, and consensus has to be found. So they are very open, very transparent. There's a grey area at the moment about what the situation would be for technical specifications. Any case, it's a fallback. The Commission have always said it's the last resort. Hopefully we would never get to that, but just as a heads up that the European Commission does have the right to provide technical specifications if a harmonized standard is not being developed in due time. Partly completed machinery has always been another area of hot contention among stakeholders. So the proposal in the regulation is that PCM will be defined and lots of clauses about what the requirements are for PCM. So I say lots of clauses, I didn't mean that negatively. I meant that there are lots of clarification and legal clarity on what the requirements are for PCM, which maybe don't exist in the existing directive. So again, something which has been hotly debated over many years, may be getting more clarity on it in the regulation. Perhaps the biggest issue that we industry had in respect of the revision was on conformity assessment procedures. So I previously mentioned what are currently Annex 4 in the existing directive have moved to Annex 1. So that was all of those lists, all of that list that I think was 23 types of machinery, plus 2 more types of product that the European Commission have tagged on, which are basically if you have AI, using other words, but if you have AI in a safety, if that performs a safety function, then that would also fall into this new Annex 1. So it was all of the existing list plus a couple of extras, but the European Commission in their proposal had removed all ability for manufacturers to self-assess and self-declare that those machines complied with the new requirements, even if there were harmonized standards that were available that covered all of the risks. So this was a significant change, and one that would cause manufacturers a very large amount of additional burden, cost, delay, and inflexibility to their programs. So we have, from day one of seeing this this new requirement through CEA, have been raising our voice loud and clear to the state, to the institutions, that we thought this was entirely unfair. There is no grounds for doing so. There is no safety grounds for doing so. It's simply adding an additional burden with no benefit. Glad to say that CEA's other sectors' voices have been heard, and that the European Parliament and Council have changed significantly the European Commission's original proposal. In fact, so the Parliament have removed most of the items, with some remaining from that list, and the Council have removed everything except these last 2, and these were the 2 that were actually added to the list of existing machinery directive items. So as I say, systems for which you could read AI, ensuring safety functions and using machine learning approaches, and machinery embedding systems that ensure safety functions. Yeah, there are, so these will remain at least in the list, where you will have to have a notified body to assess them. You won't be able to do it yourself. Hopefully, all of the other items will be removed from that list of where mandatory requirements, where notified bodies are mandatorily required to perform the conformity assessment, and that manufacturers will be able to perform conformity assessment on the existing list of Annex 4 machinery, provided that there are harmonized standards in existence that you can use to obtain that presumption of conformity. So what happens next on the machinery directive? Well, CEA will continue to advocate its position. It's now limited as to what it can do. I mean, CEA can do nothing really directly because this is now in trilogue. It's between the Commission, the member states, and the MEPs, and therefore it's only CEA members who can really perform advocacy towards their member state representatives and their MEPs. Of course, CEA is a member of CEA, but we no longer have any MEPs or member state or representatives in these bodies. So there's nothing that CEA members can do directly, but CEA members based, for example, in Germany, France, Italy, Sweden, and the like, are continuing to push their member, to their representatives in the trialogue for industry-friendly outcomes to those positions I just mentioned. So that's where we are with regards to the machinery directive. Where we are in the UK is going to be the hot question, I'm sure, on everybody's lips. What will the UK do in response, if anything? What will the UK do with the changing EU situation? So I guess the UK could, once the situation is finalised and published in the EU, the UK could copy exactly word for word almost, and just restructure according to the UK regulatory framework like it has with the existing directive, and put it into UK law. It could maybe copy with some slight modification to the technical requirements. It could do nothing. It could say, well, we're going to stick with the existing UK regulation, or it could do something entirely different. It could say, well, we recognise, the EU has changed its law, we're going to change our law, but it's going to go down a completely different route. It's entirely down to the UK, of course. It's sovereign, it now has sovereignty and able to write its own laws. So it's entirely up to the UK what it does. It has made no commitment so far, no comment even on what it will do for obvious reasons. As I say, I mean, there are two aspects. There's technical aspects, which is always difficult to get BEIS to speak about early. But of course, there's the political aspect, and BEIS will not be drawn on any aspect regarding whether or not the UK will follow for political reasons, or not or will diverge for political reasons. So that matter remains completely open as to what the UK will do. Through that industry forum I mentioned earlier, we are actually keeping the UK updated, because of course they've lost their route into the EU to understand what is happening at an EU level. So they have lost their conduit to understand what's happening. So we are updating BEIS as to what the changes are and what the updates are to the EU directive. And we will hopefully get feedback from them during those meetings as to what the thinking is in BEIS, although I would assume that they will stay relatively tight-lipped. Okay, so that's the situation with regards to the EU. We are now just 2 minutes to 2 o'clock. I think we've just got one question, have we, on the chat? So I'll attempt to answer this one question before we get to the 2 o'clock. I've got two questions now, break. So from David Clark, for paper operator manuals, is there a limit to the number of paper copies an end user can request before the 6-month window closes? No, there isn't. And this is an area where it's open, and we would seek absolute clarity in the guidance. At the moment, it says that the original document said the purchaser, so you maybe think that's one person. There is a proposal to change it to the user can ask for a copy. Well, of course, rental machinery, I mean, how many users have you got? How do you verify even it's a user? Anybody could write in and say, I'd like a copy of the instructions, please, for free. So there is nothing in that. And that's one of the areas we're concerned about that remains open. And we want to get that tied down either in the legal text, or preferably in the legal text, but possibly in the guidance as a fallback. So hopefully that answers your question. Sorry to rush, but we're up. Time is up. And then Kieran MacDonald asks, would the new machinery reg require new legislation in Northern Ireland? I don't believe it would. I believe it is okay as it is. Kieran, by the way, Kieran, the Blue Guide has just been published. I don't know if you've seen it. Just in the last weeks, the Blue Guide has been revised and published, and it includes a whole new section on the rules as they apply of the single market into Northern Ireland. So there may be some helpful information there, but I don't think there's any specific areas that need to be covered. But if you think there are, Kieran, please let me know, and we can cover that. So it is exactly 2 o'clock. So I am going to wrap up. I'll just scroll down quickly. So there was topics there I didn't cover. Sorry about that. As I say, we'll carry those over to a future session of the Power Hour. Joanna would shoot me if I didn't flag up that we now have a date fixed for the Plantworks 2023, 13th to 15th of June. Sales are now open, so please contact Plantworks if you or when you want to exhibit there, and please put a placeholder in your calendars, 13th to 15th of June next year. And that's it. We have no future dates at the moment for the next Power Hours. Joanna will be in touch in due course to update you on that. So that brings me to an end for the Power Hour and the technical aspect. So I am now going to hand over to Sunita, who I guess is going to open the AGM. So Sunita, the floor is yours.